Hi,
Okay, I've
everybody.
seen that.
Uh, wait a minute, David. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the July 19th Tinderbox Meetup. Great to have you all here. I'm not sure where Mr. Anderson or Mr. Bernstein are, but that's quite all right. We can handle it ourselves. Typically, in these meetups, we go around the room and we have new people introduce each other. It's summer months, and so it's been pretty quiet, and there's nobody new right now. And we jump into a theme if we had one. Otherwise, we talk about our Tinderbox projects. So let's just jump right in. So does anybody or any of you on the call right now have a Tinderbox project you're working on, or if not Tinderbox, some other tool for thought or exercise you're looking at?
Well, I have one suggestion for a topic just to discuss, um, and that is, our favorite desires for improvements to adornments.
Okay, let's talk
Yeah,
about
I
that.
just, yeah, I was just doing just starting to play with the grid capability, and as an example of the kind of thing that just was a little bit non-obvious. I noticed that
Okay.
you can put labels on the grid cells. Okay, cool. I actually wanted to number the grid cells. Um, how do you do that? Well, you need a list to be set up to correspond to the positions. And which order does that list get set into? Okay, all of that I could figure out through trial and error. But the one that was really eluding me was I couldn't see the labels. And I was just figuring out, oh, what am I doing wrong? Until
Hmm.
I eventually looked very closely at my screen and realized that the labels get the same text color as the grid. So you have to set the
Hmm.
grid to black to be able to see the text.
Can you show that to us just so people can see it? Can you share your screen and let us see
Oh,
what you're
I
doing?
can, I can, I can see if I can do that.
Now, as we're talking about it, and as you're pulling up, the other thing I'd like to see is the ability for the on add smart triggers to be smarter so that each of the different grids could have a different on add trigger and as well as a
Okay,
smart adornment.
are you seeing my screen now?
We are.
All right. So if I click on this adornment and bring up the grid, um, the one of the things that you'll notice is that um, I had to change. This is the grid outline color. It isn't obvious what that is when you bring this up, but that's the outline color. The lines on the grid are this color.
Hmm.
And if I change that to be something like, well, I don't know,
Well, seven's the
very
default.
light
Yeah, yeah, there
gray,
you go. Got it. Got it.
how the hell can you see what's what? I mean, it's not a bad thing from a grid if you want a subtle grid, but it's unfortunate that you can't decouple the grid color from the label color. And yet,
Ah, got it.
if I go up here and look at, um, I got to get this out of the way. Look at this. I have, if I just put in grid, um, so I can add, these are the elements or the attributes that deal with grids, and there's nothing that says what the label color or the grid color is. Um,
Hmm.
Grid color is the outline. There's nothing that's separate for the label, so there's no grid
Yeah,
label color. And so
got it.
that's just an example. I just realizing, there are a lot of little subtleties like this that as we've gotten a little bit more sophisticated with our use of Tinderbox, that maybe some of these things are worth revisiting as issues to potentially address as refinements. And I just thought maybe other people have been fooling around with adornments, doing similar things, and would have other comments that, so we might sort of develop a little list of things we'd like to see with adornments. And um, some of this comes down to documentation. So, for example, you can have an on ad for an adornment, but we have nothing about any other potential rules that could be associated with adornments. I believe I saw it sometime. I just haven't had a chance to test it recently. That you can do an on remove from an adornment, but
Yes.
not documented. So there's just it's maybe something that very few people use. I don't know how much people use adornments or how often people do things like put grids in them and things like that. Um, so part of my
Yeah.
reason for bringing it up is just sort of to ask the question, how useful is this? Do people make regular use
Mhm.
of it? Um, as you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm building an electrical panel, and so I'm trying to take these things. This is my diagram view, so I'm trying to bring
Mhm.
in um, items and position them in the grid.
Mhm. Well,
Fairly
and on that
straightforward.
note, I would like, if possible, the ability to have a unique on add for each element of the grid,
Uh-huh.
and the ability for the smart adornment to work on each element of that grid. So you could create one large adornment, have grids on it, and then be able to drop notes on the different elements of the grid, which would trigger a unique on add for each of that element, like it's a label or any other of the other attribute values, or a
Yeah.
link to or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you could do that by just stacking adornments on top of adornments. So I'm
You could, but but then
the
that creates all of this manual effort if you could just trigger the grid.
right. Or if you could say, I'd like a grid with an adornment in each grid element, that might do it as well.
Hmm.
Um, so there's several
Okay.
ways it could be. You could slice it.
Yeah.
Let me go back here and just do this. I'll make it something like blue. So I may just be bringing up something that nobody else is interested in. It was something that I realized I hadn't played around with a lot, and that
Yep.
there are certainly rooms for some refinements.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. And you're making it kind of this kind of long vertical because of what like an electrical box kind of format, or
Literally, it
as a
is. I am trying. I'm. This isn't one of my diagrams, and so those are actual notes in the diagram that relate to each circuit breaker. And there are circuit breakers that are combined to do a 240
Mhm.
volt circuit.
Got it.
And I'm just laying them out, and then I'm going to be showing other connections to them.
Hmm.
Um, so it's just a way to diagram something which is real, physical,
Yeah.
but yet have it all relate to notes that if I go over into my outline view, I've got here's my main panel. I can look at a circuit breaker. I can get some definition of what it is. I have these transformers that allow me to monitor the electrical uh, current or power of each of the circuits. So I've got these elements and I want to connect them up to the corresponding circuit breakers. So that's what I'm doing with the diagram. And I found adornments are very useful in the diagramming, but I'm also coming across some use cases that are not as um, that where adornments could be more effective if they had a few additional tweaks to them.
Yep. Any does anybody else have any other comments? Like what other tweaks might would you want in an adornment? Like Art, can you talk about your tweaks on the adornment tweaks that you've had lately? Maybe you can demonstrate them and show us how you're using it.
Sure, I can. Actually, if you give me 2 or 3 minutes, because I just joined the conversation, so I'm a little behind, and I'll set up my a little project and show you what
Yeah,
I've.
yeah, that would be great because again we don't really have a formal agenda today, and Chuck
Okay,
kicked us off by wanting to talk about adornments. So
nice.
while we wait for you, let's pop over to Frederick, who said he has something to talk about this week. Frederick.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm trying to, I don't know if the video works. Yeah, I was working on to-dos, and I know you've done stuff with that with your time management, which is way too complicated for me, but I have a problem figuring out even where to begin. Do I have a minute to share something on the screen?
We have an hour and a half.
I didn't want to cut short your other discussion. Let
No,
me
no. This is a free form conversation today. We'll come back to
He
art
let
when
me
you're done.
have an
let me
hour and a
see.
half as he smiles evilly.
So this is horrible, I know, but I instead of using Tinderbox, I used Excel um, to
Hmm.
outline the problem because I guess, lazy, and I couldn't figure out how I'd even share this concept with you in Tinderbox, so I went to Excel. So I don't know, do you see the Excel sheet?
Hmm.
We do.
So, and I have also, so you have a concept, Michael, of initiatives and projects and tasks. I looked at your earlier thing and it's really complicated, but I can see that you did great stuff, but it's way too much for me. So I thought I'd instead back up and look at the problem. So I have a bunch of initiatives. Those are the tabs in Tinderbox, like help my mother get moved, work on my house, figure out how to use Tinderbox, maybe do something with Roman history. So those are initiatives in your terms, I think. And then in that, in helping my mother get moved, I've got these various, um, I don't think they're projects. I think they're tasks. I'm not sure, but figure out what we need, what we want to put in the place she's moving to, get the measurements, decide on the furniture, figure out how to move. These are sub projects with sub projects, um, or tasks. I don't really know. And then for the house, I have different projects like fix the kitchen, fix the dining room. And then in those, I have lots of sub projects like put the kitchen cabinet that fell off the wall back on because they didn't put the screws into the stud. I don't need to go into that. Fix the kitchen floor. Maybe there's a floor underneath what they put down. I don't know. Finish the ceiling and the dining room painted. So you can see, and then I want attributes. I want to be able to say, this work I'm doing is for this room in the house. This work is this type of work. It's this difficulty, this priority. So I have these concepts, and I'm trying to figure out what's an attribute, what's a prototype. Can I inherit a prototype? And then I have questions about Tinderbox, like, can I take a task, the built-in task, and can P-task inherit from it so it gets all the attributes, or do I just copy it and make a new prototype? I'm not really sure. I really haven't read the manual. I'm sorry. But I know on add would be useful for this stuff because if I add a new thing for the kitchen, I should on add get it to the prototype that's correct for the project that inherits from kitchen and all that. So I know that I'm supposed to do that kind of stuff. And Rome is pretty simple, except there I should read this book first and then read this book. And so this project has this initiative has two projects which have time dependency on each other. So I put this in Excel because I thought I would just make a mess in Tinderbox, even trying to explain my problem. So I was looking, let me switch. I don't know if I can do this. Let me see if I can show my Tinderbox. Yeah, this one. So now I don't know what I'm sharing. Am I sharing
Yeah,
Tinderbox?
we see your tinderbox. Yeah.
So, I said, well, I have prototypes. I have a thing called a task. It's not really different than the original tasks. I didn't quite figure out what to do. Then I wanted to have a home repair task where I had an attribute that said, well, this task affects multiple rooms in the house or whatever. And then I'm like, is a P home repair task its own thing or does it inherit from P task? So I got kind of asked that. P project is, I stole from your on ad stuff, Michael, but I didn't really do it right. And then I have an initiative, and then I said, well, if I'm going to fix the house, I want to reattach the kitchen cabinet. And so that is a task of some sort. And so I kind of stopped there because I said, well, I'm just now fumbling around. I know I need to figure out, I got to decide what's prototypes, what's attributes, what makes it useful. So the first question I'm asking is, you know, is the room of the house, it sounds like it's both a project and also an attribute. And is it, I think I would just go with a generic project or initiative or task. and then have an attribute that says which room it is. I think that's the way to go. But on the other hand, if I have a mountain of stuff to do in the kitchen, do I make a kitchen
Mm.
specific
Yeah.
project?
All right. So
You know,
so
you,
so
you see
so
where I'm
so
going?
so first and foremost, I think your my initial reaction as I hear you talk is you're getting stuck in analysis paralysis and you feel like you need to have it right before you start. And and which is fine because I've been there countless times and I probably experience that several times a week even now. The second thing is starting off with Excel is great. Sometimes I do that too. You could have easily done a similar exercise, however, in map view, right? And taken all of those different notes that you had generated and positioned each of those different elements that you had in the Excel spreadsheet and drop them down as individual notes in map view and created that association. So like right there, get mother moved. Each one of those note, and you could, if you want, we can play with that exercise. Each one of those things could start out as and just like we were talking with Chuck just a minute ago, each one of your sheet names down there could be adornments or containers. I start out as adornments, but eventually they could be containers. So because those are kind of the buckets for the projects that you're working on, but I can come back to that and suggest a different view to look at that. But I would for me, if I were to start and not doing this exercise in Excel, I would start with map view and just start brainstorming all of these ideas. And
So,
then
okay.
start moving them around into their like little clustered buckets.
So you wouldn't even bother starting with prototypes. You'd start with map view
Yeah,
and
yeah. Initially, just start with notes. What are all my ideas?
all right.
And then eventually you're like, okay, well, where are these concepts? Where are these ideas that are clustering? Like I know I need tasks. Okay, so that's a task prototype. I know I need projects, so that's a project prototype. And the other thing I might suggest, and this would be an interesting dialogue, and then let's let Steve comment in. And I hesitate to say this word because David's with us today. Um, it's what terminology do you want to use? Right? And it really doesn't matter. It only matters is if it makes sense to you.
Right.
So,
And
and in the world of like Scrum, software engineering, we use a concept called agile. And so we don't call them tasks, we call them user stories. It just depends on what terminology you want to use. So I often, but I've struggled with this still to this day. But I'll start with initiatives, and initiatives are like this overarch. And in the software development, we would call it an epic. We have this overarching big thing we're trying to get done, and then within an initiative, you could have several projects, and within several projects, you could have any number of different tasks or activities that need to be done. And those tasks, and you could have things like events too, because an event is a task that has different type of activity or a different type of task. So we could be mapping that out too if you wanted to. Um, and then naturally for me, as you go through this process, you then start thinking about, well, then, to your point, how do I want to, um, put it, put how do I want to assign what project each task is related to? And then how might I want to rediscover that later? These are the kinds of things we can talk about. And we could spend the whole next hour, brainstorming this out for you. But before I'm going to shut up now and let Steve chime in.
I agree wholeheartedly. Sort of, let's not formalize what we want too quickly. So, what do we do? We basically are taking ideas and we're throwing them on a canvas, like a map view or something like that. And once they're there, then we start thinking about relationships in the broadest sense, like whole and part relationships. This has to happen before this. That's sort of predecessor kinds of relationships. Um, and you've sort of gone along the lines for some of the house things of where these things take place. All of those things are relationships. And it may feel like you're slogging through mud and you're not sort of getting to something useful, but the dividends pay off later when you have sort of continued to throw things on your canvas and start to move things around to represent relationships or creating connections between them. Um, what you're trying to do is understand the problem by taking the stuff out of your head and putting it down and discovering new things like, oh, I need to buy this thing or I need to do this before something else kind of thing. So you're enriching your understanding of the problem by playing.
I have a lot of this on paper and I've got thousands of things I need to do. This is just a sampling to get myself started with Tinderbox. It's all on paper and I've got like 10,000 tasks, it seems. And I know for the home repair, I kind of want to do it by room or location because I don't intend to tear up the whole house at once, right? I want to
Makes
work one room at a time.
I would say take the 10,000 tasks and take an easily uh, part that you can kind of separate out from the other ones and start there by throwing stuff in Tinderbox, just creating notes in whichever place makes sense for you, whether it's the map view or the outline view or whatever. Even the hyperbolic view can sometimes be helpful. But just start there and don't try to be too focused on what Tinderbox, sort of the automation behind Tinderbox and that kind of thing, and concern yourself with really understanding the problems, the relationships, and those kinds of things first. The rest of it will become a clearer path on what you start with in terms of creating prototypes and so on when you fully understand the problem. I find there's a challenge between should it be a note or should it be an attribute? Should it
Right.
be represented by the hierarchy or should it simply be an attribute that I assign to these things? So rooms are a classic example. Um, should we have an attribute called rooms, or should all of those tasks that are related to a specific room be children of that room? I
Exactly.
don't know.
That's
I
what I'm
don't
struggling
know.
with. I don't
And
know.
for every problem, you kind of the notes and sort of um, their insistence that you'll dive into the problem and you'll continue adding notes and once you see them you'll start saying okay, I need to reserve the hierarchy for some other task or some other reason for organizing the stuff, um, and I will use attributes for these other things. But that doesn't happen a priori. You have to wrestle with the problem first.
See,
And
I was wondering
Yeah.
how agile I can really be with Tinderbox. I know there's some weird thing where if you change a prototype or something, things don't change elsewhere. They stay the way they were before. That's one thing we've talked about somewhere. But I guess it's you can be pretty agile with stamps,
You
right? You can
you
fix
can
things.
be agile with Tinderbox exceptionally so. You can change prototypes, you can change attributes, you can change data types on those attributes. As your thinking evolves, Tinderbox evolves with you. And one of the beautiful things about the tool is there's Mark's done a really hard job, a really hard effort, put in a really hard effort to ensure that there is no data destruction. Now your action, and you're not doing a lot of action code, so you're really not going to have a problem with data destruction at this point. Um, so there's very little to lose. The one thing I might react is as you were talking about, there's a tendency, and I certainly did this myself, to say, well, I have tasks, but then I have tasks for the house. Okay, well, a task. So for me, a task you could do that, but then you could end up having 10 different prototypes that are related to this concept called task. And like and you can do that, and there's no problem for that. And I think one of the reasons that you might want to do that is you want a way of visually distinguishing one type of task from another type of task. Like, so when you're in map view, or you're in map view in particular, you want to say, okay, here are visually my house tasks versus here are my other kinds of tasks. Well, for me, what I would do is I would say there is only one prototype called task. There's an attribute in there that sets the project that that task is related to. And then if you wanted visual triggers for yourself, you could say, if it's project X, then color it this color. Or if it's project Y, then give it this badge. Or if it's project Z, then give it that flag. And so that way you're limiting the number of task prototypes and the complexity that you'll generate from yourself there. And you're using action code to give you that visual nuance you need that will facilitate and support your thinking. Likewise, you could then also create a stamp. I would suggest do it as an edict or a rule that says when this task is complete, do something to it, like put a line through it, make it green. So then that way you can, and you can even say then move it to the completed task bucket.
Yeah, that makes
And there's
perfect sense.
and there's a tendency, because of the way we use our Mac OS infrastructure, to say, and I still struggle with this a lot, in that, and you have to think about it. Are my tasks organized as children of a project, or are my tasks all in a giant chum bucket called tasks folder, and they're distinguished, and they're listed by the different projects? And for me, the answer is yes, they're both. It really just depends on the state of mind I'm in when I'm generating that. And then ultimately, I because I've done it, I've tagged them properly. Like when they're done, I move them. I tend to move them, the done ones, into more of like a completed task chum bucket, because I know I can tease them out again later with agents, or move them around as needed. But if I need that task associated within a container for that immediate need, I just leave it there, and I know I can move it later.
Well, one of the things that can often help when you're doing this iterative process of figuring out how you want to organize things is to realize that sometimes we think hierarchically, and we think in terms of outlines, and we get stuck because things don't really lay out that way sometimes in the real world. Um, and that's where aliases and links come in as being very useful augments to what you're trying to do. So, for example, having projects, is it project associated with a room? Is a project associated with a particular contractor? Is a project something that you need to view as a task that has to be related to other tasks? Those kinds of issues might not immediately lay themselves out in a nice hierarchical fashion, but that's where a link can come in, and the ability to create link types gives you a whole nother dimension in which you can organize things after the fact, but in a way that's rational, allows you to track what's going on. And then alias just have the benefit of, first of all, you can have an agent that collects a bunch of things that are similar as aliases, but you can also create an alias at any time and place it wherever you want, knowing that you're always dealing with the same note.
My sense is that attributes are really powerful from all the discussions and things we've done, and that if I have, for example, the room as an attribute, then I could also have a preview or print that just prints a certain room or whatever, and it could be driven from the attribute. I'm thinking ahead, right, of the code that you would have.
Yeah, let's put it this way. Let me say it a different way. And I love Mark Anderson's comment maybe like 2 years ago, joking on the Beyonce song, "If you love it, put a ring on it." If you love it, put an attribute on it, right? And if you think about it, let's take a huge step back. Everything in Tinderbox is an attribute. Every aspect of Tinderbox is an attribute. Even, and if you think about what is the nature of a note, but the collection of attributes. Think of it like a cell. A node is like a cell, and the membrane of that cell is, the values of that and all of the protons and atoms of that cell are being held together by their associated attribute values, and that's what. And if you think about it, what is the name of a node? It's called name, attribute name. What is the text of a node? It's called text attribute. And all Tinderbox does as a fundamental tool is enable you to create associations between all of those values of attributes. And you can use action code to manipulate them. You can use templates to visualize them. You can use all of the different tools, the 10 built-in views to visualize them. You can then use templates to create your own visuals, and then even export them out in any way, shape, or form you want. And that's what Tinderbox is all about. So, and to your point, going back to your point you made, the understanding of the nature of an attribute is the most important thing, in my opinion, when you're thinking about Tinderbox.
Okay, this is great. So thank you. I think what I should do is go back and think about your suggestions and make notes. And I have a question, if you have a moment, about Tinderbox itself. I get all tangled up because it seems that everybody, or at least you, Michael, mostly work in outline view. And that makes sense to me because I can really see how the notes relate to each other and what they're doing. And map view, everything gets lost on this canvas that I have to scroll through, and I'm not quite sure where stuff is. And then I'm in outline view and I say, oh, I want to make this note have this prototype, and I don't know how to do it. So I have to go back to map view and
no, go back to Tinderbox. It's super
let
easy.
let me go back to Tinderbox.
It's absolutely insanely easy.
Let me stop sharing and
there's two ways to do it.
Wait a minute. Oh God. Where did the share menu go? Oh, there it is.
And again, there's no reason why you should know how to do this unless you stumbled across it or someone showed you. The other thing, by the way, for me, is, it gives me high levels of anxiety when I just see your output. Move the prototypes to the bottom.
Yeah, I didn't do that. I knew about that.
Yeah. So, and if you just hit select, so if you select the prototypes and move it to the bottom, and then you need to tab them in.
Wait, I'm doing something wrong. Hold on. How do I seem to be having a technical difficulty.
If you right click, it will show you an option, move to top.
Or more importantly, move the fixed up, like move fixed house up. There you go.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
Fine.
So now here's how you do it. There's two ways to do it. You see the little square to the right of the triangle, the expanding triangle.
Yeah.
Right mouse click on that.
Oh, right mouse click. I just plain clicked on it. Oh, okay.
There's your list of prototypes.
Because I was doing something different and it didn't work. Okay.
No. So right mouse click on
I
it.
got it.
You got it.
Yeah, I got it. I saw it. There's a pull down.
And then select a prototype.
So I can say it's a project or whatever.
There you go.
There was another let me ask you the other question
Now, the other way to do that real quick, hit Command 1, open up your inspector, which we may not be able to see.
Can you see
Okay,
it?
we can. Yeah. And so if you click on the documents inspector, the little white box. No, click on number 4, sorry. Right. And then you can assign a prototype to a note there.
Okay. I got confused with that too because I thought I was changing the prototype when I did that. Does the inspector cover everything? I thought there was like
nearly everything.
Because there's a prototype inspector, which is a different thing, right?
No. And then now here's the other thing is click on Quick Stamp real quick.
Is that this one? I forget.
No, right there. Type in the word prototype. Right there, click prototype from the list.
Which one?
Click prototype.
Okay.
Okay. So you see its prototype is P task. So now if you change that to P project,
it'll do the same thing we did before, right?
Yeah. Right. So remember, again, this is the power of Tinderbox. So if you remember, no, hit apply. You got to hit. Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
So the power of Tinderbox is Tinderbox uses the values of attributes to store value and to run its operations. So it uses the attribute value to actually function. So, for example, if you type in displayed attributes right there, while we're just where it says prototype, type displayed attributes there. And once your head finally like groks this, the world of Tinderbox opens up. So you see that list of notes, start date, end date, etc. That is the list that is telling Tinderbox of which attributes to display and in what order. So if in front of start date, right there in that list, if you type the word prototype and then hit a semicolon, not S, the word prototype because it's the name of the attribute.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, hit apply. See the word you see in your displayed attributes, the prototypes just appeared.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Right. And then if you move that, if you drag prototype and like drag it to the like just above on add or anywhere else. Okay. Now go back and look there. You'll see the list order changed.
Okay. Yeah, this is powerful, and there's different ways to do things. It's just I get confused.
Of course. It's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So it looks like I just need to do a little more now on my own. Thanks for helping me.
Well, and the big thing is to that point, to just do it. It's like anything else. It's unfamiliar until you've done it a gazillion times. And then, and actually, let me suggest this too. You remember the Malcolm Gladwell book Blink?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, or yeah. So Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Blink, and in that book, he says it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. And the popular zeitgeist stole that and say, do 10,000 hours to get everything in. Well, honestly, where that came from was research that was done by Frederick Erickson at the International University of Miami, I think, in 1997. And ultimately, what Fredrickson was saying is, yes, it takes 10,000 hours. He kind of maybe said something like that in his work, and Gladwell kind of popularized the term. But what he was really saying is, in order to become an expert in something, you need to do three things. You need focused, consistent effort in very specific time blocks. So it's not that you take 10,000 hours in a row and you're an expert. You need to take blocks of time, 45 minutes here, 15 minutes there, an hour there, 3 hours there, blocks of concerted, focused time, consistently over time to become an expert in something. The second thing you need to do is you need to be measuring your performance. So am I actually in these blocks of time? Am I actually learning? Am I actually improving? And then the third thing is you need a coach. And that's how you become an expert, because you need an external observer helping you evaluate your performance to let you know if you're actually improving or not, because we're too close to ourselves and we can't see it. And so according to Erickson, in order to become an expert in something, it takes those three things. And then you consistently do that over time and you become an expert. And then there was a wonderful article I just read a couple months ago. I think I might have actually gotten it from this group. I'm not sure. But it was an article on the surprising route to a happy life. I think that was the name of the not happy was the wrong term. Let me pull up the article and I'll drop these references. Yeah, a surprising route to the best life possible is the name of the article. And essentially what the article concludes with is, if you can get to a point where you can just exist in the process and not strive for the outcome, but do the process simply because you're just simply drawn to doing it, and that is what will achieve. And it won't necessarily mean you're happy. And you may constantly be under an enormous amount of internal and external unhappiness and pressure and dissatisfaction. just like when you're working out and it really physically hurts, but you just know that you're drawn to be doing that, and that just the process in itself is what is helping you self actualize. Then that's the route to again the best possible life.
It's
So when you
flow.
for me for yeah it's flow. So for me, when you combine those two things, if you can combine that flow with Erickson's view of what it means to become an expert, and that honestly, that's why I do Tinderbox constantly every day, because it's my tool that helps me reach that. But I'll get off my preamp my soapbox now. Anybody else have any thoughts, comments? So first, Frederick, was that helpful?
That was extremely helpful. Thank you. Yes, I'm gonna work on it. I think it's great.
Eh,
And yeah, I was obsessing a little bit yesterday. So thank you.
Yeah. And is there any other support we can offer at this moment, or what else do we?
No, no, I think that's great. I think that making notes and keeping it simple is the way to go. So I'll work on that.
Yeah, and then eventually you'll get complex. Eventually you'll end up where I'm at.
Yeah, I looked at what
Um,
you did. I mean, it was awesome what you did, but I looked at it and I said, you know. I
yeah,
don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It was your time management.
yeah. I did that like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I did that one of my manic efforts to learn how to use Tinderbox, and that's what came out.
I mean, it's great that you saw I stole some of your icons and stuff. But anyway.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. All right. Anybody else have another comment?
I could propose like a slightly alternate approach, because I'm a lazy guy, and typically I sort of grabbed onto the whole incremental formalization thing early, but so my way of sort of approaching this is I try to go for the lowest tech and the most simple visual, because I'm visual in terms of how I perceive this. So say as an example, if we had Fred's um, conundrum here as to like repairing the house, his mom's house or his house. Um, I'm not against the idea of sort of starting out in Tinderbox with one type of organization in mind, and then as I go, completely changing that. I brought this up even at past meetups, is because I try not to get wedded to my process. And so that means is if I start out saying, well, I'm gonna do this repair work, right? And then in my head, if I see the Tinderbox map view as a map of the house, I might start sort of laying out the house and going, okay, living room, kitchen, this, that, and the other, and then create little notes that say paint, and then drop them into the rooms that require paint, and then another one that drop them into rooms that require some carpentry work, or make a blue icon for things I want advice on. And then sort of just look at that. And then over time, it starts getting more and more complicated because I start investing more and more into the project I'm doing. So if I go, well, this room requires 10 hours of paint and that room requires 2 hours of paint, maybe the icon, the note that's in room X is much bigger. Now I already have a map view that's showing me not only my layout, but which rooms need what and how much time each is going to take. It's not even, I don't even have to use any coding. I just open it up, I look at it and I go, "Oh, okay, this is my task list." As I complete the task list, I may decide I want to color those notes gray. Or, if I click the button, if I have a checkbox that says done, they'll go gray or they'll be struck out. And so it becomes an ongoing relationship with that project. And at some point, I may go like, no, this is really not serving me because although my layout is very organized in terms of what is in which room, I actually completely need it in terms of, say, chronological time that, well, in February, I've got X amount of time. So that's what I'm going to take on. So then I could just abandon my entire organization because it's low tech and I haven't spent much time doing it. I don't feel wedded to that process. I may come up with an outline view that goes, okay, January this, February that, March, Joe is going to come into town and he'll help me hoist the whatever that I need to for the post and beam. In April is the best month to do, dry rot. So it just depends on you. And that's half the fun for me in Tinderboxes. I just keep playing around with the organization because my goal is only to get those tasks done.
So you would actually create a note. Let's say you have a note that says kitchen and you want to paint it. This is really dumb. You're gonna create a note in MapView that says kitchen, and then you're gonna create a note that says paint and drag the paint note into the box that's the kitchen note, and that in outline view, that would be, I think, a child, wouldn't it? But that's how you do it in map view, or are you thinking something different?
So for something like this, and it's actually a really good question you bring up because say I start out in map view. Really, all I want to do is stay in that view, and so therefore I would typically make each room an adornment, not a note. Because
Mhm.
when I drop a note into a note, it disappears inside the note. Then I don't know what the hell is going on in that
Right.
room. But if it were an adornment, and I can even shape the adornments differently, and so I can go, well, this adornment, and it won't show up in my outline view necessarily, but it'll definitely show up in my map view. At some point, I decide, oh, I need to list out everything in outline view. Then I'm sort of presented with a conundrum as to, well, if I move this to outline view, I'd have a whole bunch of things that say paint. Well, in that case, I'll go back to my map view and I'll start. I may add, paint living room, or I may decide that all living room gets a particular color or it gets a particular flag. So I'm just trying to articulate different ways of presenting the same note without actually having to duplicate the work. And obviously, say as an example, like if I'm going to paint the living room lilac and the kitchen white, you see where I'm going with this. So you can
Yes.
sort of keep kind of getting more and more formalized with how you want it to present. The idea is to make it immediately evident to you where you left off. You may stop these projects for 4 or 5 months. If you go back to it, if you've built it yourself, you will typically find the sort of mnemonics that appeal to you will reach out right at you and go, oh yeah, that's exactly what I had in mind.
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm with you. I mean, I'm trying to get it done. I'm just trying to get everything organized in a way that I'll know what I'm about, right? And I'm trying to do it
Yeah.
quickly, simply, yet at the same time, I'm getting tangled up in how do I do that? And it's not just Tinderbox, it's paper and everything else. It's just no
Yeah.
matter what I do, it gets complicated, and I'm
Yeah,
trying not.
And honestly, and that's why I like Tinderbox because I can have that complication all in one place.
Yeah,
And then I can move it around and push it into different containers and pull it back out and make it messy again. It's like having all of my clothes in my closet. And every once in a while, I pull all of my clothes out, make a freaking mess, stick them back in, do it again. And that ebb and flow is why I so love about Tinderbox because all of my clothes are in one place. It's just I move them around. Sometimes the shirts are here, sometimes the shorts are there. Um, and just to be clear, you look at the stuff I do, and the reason why I do all of the automation is unlike art, who's ev- who whose artistic projects are unique for every project. For me, I'm in business and my project outputs they're generally formulaic. The structure is the same
right.
for all the output, right? And now the input and the content and the context that's changing. Um, but I need glossaries, I need indexes, I need consistent terms, I need them all linked together. I need to be able to produce this output in an efficient and an effective way, and that's why I've built my 5 Cs modules,
Right.
right? And so my 5 Cs modules they'll lean towards repeatable, semi-structured outputs. And in the way I've developed the modules and the way I've built the templates, then for the 80% of the projects are all the same. And I've learned enough about the templating methodology for the 20% that needs to be customized for each project, I can do now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of and so Art and I are actually on that kind of that spectrum of Tinderbox users. He's on that creative, it's always different. And I'm on the opposite side, it's nearly every project's the same with only 20% different. Whereas for him, 80% of the projects are always, or even 90% of the projects are different every time, and only 10% is the same. And that's
actually,
kind of the spectrum.
I intentionally sometimes do that. So
Yeah,
it's a,
yeah,
yeah, but it's very
because
well
that's the way your
said.
brain works. Whereas
Yeah.
my ADHD,
Neuroplasticity.
whereas my ADHD brain needs that structure, otherwise I lose my shit.
No, it's very, very well phrased. And it's interesting also to note that what also works along the spectrum is time. I basically I have time to play, which is the artist's prerogative. You have to basically let go of time. Whereas
Whereas
the
I don't.
spectrum,
Like
which
my
is time
deadline's
sensitive.
Monday.
Yeah, exactly. And I do time sensitive projects for my business stuff, but basically most of that happens in Apple numbers, actually, because it's much faster. It's all numbers and the kind of things that I'm doing They all end with me, and I can plop up 7 or 8 spreadsheets on one window at a time. So, but I had this really interesting situation last month where I was putting together a legal brief for one of my the litigations that I'm working on. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm a business person, but I have certain cases to deal with. And so I had this enormous publisher. If I don't know if you guys know Affinity, it's like Adobe, but it's like a desktop, like a page
Oh yeah,
maker.
Affinity. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I use Affinity. It's cheap, and does the job. So I had this document, and it was in something like 5 main sections, and then three of them had 22 or 23 subsections each. So just kind of drafting that and going, okay, so and so claims and so case, and this police complaint leading to that. It was getting to be a nightmare in Publisher. So I was like, okay, screw this. I opened up a Tinderbox project and I started doing little visual layouts that your section's going to come here. These are the notes I have to include in this. Those are the notes. And I actually had a visual of my entire, what ended up being a 240-page presentation with foldouts. And basically, that was my navigator. That was my map where I was doing all the work in Publisher, but I would keep going back. Or if I was working on something in Publisher and has an urgent thing, oh, I have to make sure I put this in the other section, I would quickly go back to Tinderbox and add that in the text field. So when I was completely done with my first draft, I could go back to Tinderbox and pick up all the notes of and little reminders and things and connects that I needed to do. So it's a great app to use in tandem with your end case app as well.
How do you let go of time? I'd like to be able to do that. I tend to be worried about the passage of time at my age and everything. It's like there is no time. You
Yeah,
you just say, I don't care. What do you do?
No, it's fascinating, but that is sort of the cornerstone of being an artist, right? You have to, and one of the things I guess, I also had a trial by fire because I worked many years in production and post-production, and a lot of times you will be working on something for a day, a week, a month. I actually had some guy I was working on a project with who worked on something for about 6 to 7 months and was putting in 12, 14 hours a day. And the executive producer walked by one day and went, what are you working on? And the guy was like this, I've been working on this for the last 6 or 8 months. And then the executive producer says, no, we're not going to use that in the project. So, so you realize, look, if you were wedded to the time or invested in the time, it would completely blow your mind. You wouldn't be able to be a functioning member of society. But as an artist, you just basically have to be. You got to take the risk that you're going to spend hours, days, a lifetime working on something, and nobody will pay attention. Van Gogh was broke when he died. So he didn't do it with the expectation that he would make that money. You just actually have to let go of it. And
Well,
yes,
that's part of that. Live your process, live that flow. Don't worry about outcome, and supposedly that's the way to live your best life.
and that doesn't mean that the time isn't eating away at you. It just, just means that you have to contain it and manage it. That's all.
Yeah.
So along those lines, and picking up on what Art was saying about the utility of other tools, um, I'll just share that in terms of my many house projects, and I've been doing a lot of work on my house. Um, DevonThink has turned out to be, as always, a very powerful auxiliary tool to go along with Tinderbox, and it's mainly because um, I'm doing a lot of things that I haven't done before. And so when I go to tackle the things that I haven't done before, I got to go research. How do you build a wall with steel studs, for instance? Well, there's lots of information on that, and I got to go out in there and collect it and pull it together and figure out what information is useful. And then at some point, I get to using Tinderbox to perhaps uh, describe what I'm trying to do or work out the project issues or um, things of that nature, um, connect the threads in many cases. So, we really do have to think in terms of not just we're working on, but the resources we rely on for those projects. Um, and the other tool that I've wound up using a lot of is SketchUp because a diagram is a great way to build something before you actually destroy real materials and cut things wrong. So, um, and again, I keep thinking, how could I better integrate tools like that with Tinderbox? I'm not sure it's relevant enough to focus on, but it's just, I think a point that keeps cropping up over and over again within this community is that Tinderbox is great because it's something that crosses the boundaries for many tools or multiple tools. It allows us to use multiple tools and yet still bring things together from a thought perspective, from a planning perspective, from whatever it is that's motivating us.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's the only tool out there that permits me to see something both visually as well as in outline as well as conceptually.
How do you see the map? This, do you have a huge monitor? I mean, how do you see your map view in an intelligent way and still be able to see all your boxes when you're beyond like, 10 notes? How do you do it? Do you scroll all over the place or?
So right now I'm actually dog sitting for my son who's got two 30-inch monitors, so that's pleasurable. But in general, I've been traveling a lot, so I spend a lot of time in the air and things like that. So it's really my laptop usually has to suffice. But yes, it's a very important point. I think if and whenever I get the opportunity to work on a big monitor, I definitely take that because there's no better way than to be able to even, pull and collate stuff. But I've sort of trained myself to be able to imagine the larger blackboard when I'm on my laptop. So I just see that as the window. I use Spaces, Mac Spaces a lot, so I can flip between windows, just using a three-finger swipe. It initially was a pain in the butt because you're like, oh, where is this? Where is that? But
Right.
there are a couple of ways to affix in the sense like I have two or three mail apps, all of them are in one window, and whenever I launch them, they will always launch in that same window. Same thing with Tinderbox, same thing with Numbers, same thing with Safari. So just use the limited space you have in whatever way you can, I suppose. And remember one thing, like I started out this with Tinderbox. It was really funny. When I first started working in map mode, like many, many years ago, I would be like, oh, this is an important point. I'm going to make a big note out of it. Well, without paying attention to the fact that everything in Tinderbox is so relative. So like now my notes are typically like yay small. I can zoom in and zoom out of them, and it's way more convenient. I also do another thing over time. I think I've realized that I tend to box everything. So I'll never have an attribute or at the main highest level. I'll never have anything that's too big to be seen on a laptop window. It's just out of habit because really you can drill down as much as you want. And the brain is typically only looking at one thing at a time. Let's face
Mhm.
it. Like, we're not really looking at all the 40 things that are in front of us.
And then you have the flip side, Frederick, where I have my 49-inch monitor, right, with a 37-inch monitor to the right of that.
Oh my
Right.
God. And you're an outline view.
And well, you can open up. I don't know if you know this too. You can open up multiple windows of Tinderbox. So I also
Yeah.
will sometimes have multiple Tinderbox tabs open in different windows. Now,
Oh,
Tinderbox has a limitation that when you put a focus on a note in a window, every window will focus on that note. But there's strategies around that. And then the other thing I often will do is I will right mouse click on a note and open up that note as a text window. And so I'll have multiple versions of a text window. So if I'm curating and nurturing specific notes that are related to each other, I'll open those up as multiple text windows.
oh wow.
And the larger monitor space helps with that.
Yep. Bottom line
Anything
is we
else?
deal with too much information.
Yeah. Yeah. And Chuck, you had your another hand raised. And what's this SketchUp? Um, uh,
It's
No, I
Google
just referring to.
SketchUp Pro.
I raised my hand only once, but
Okay.
I was just saying SketchUp is another tool that I found played an important role in a lot of my household projects. It is a CAD tool, it's a drafting tool. It's 3D,
Got it.
and I have a much of my house is now in a 3D model, which just makes it much easier to plan things out.
Yeah.
Um, and I often note mentally that there are some connections that I would like to be drawing, pun intended, between what SketchUp is showing me and what I've got in Tinderbox. Um, but most of those issues I can deal with mentally. I don't need to go through trying to to play games with it. It's just um, I know that over in Tinderbox I've got board dimensions. Over in SketchUp, I'm putting boards in that meet those nominal dimensions. Um, those are things that I can map mentally without having to do anything in an automated fashion. Um, but yet there are within Tinderbox, the thing that I find very useful is when I've got a lot of things that need to be coordinated, such as electrical connections and how you're making them and whatnot. That's just an example I was showing earlier. Um, the Tinderbox note taking capability is very powerful, allows me to keep track of things not only in the short term, but also the long term. I've got something
Nice.
that other people can use. Someday when we sell this house or I pass on, there's going to be documentation on this house that people won't believe. And behind me, you see the mess of all the stuff that I deal with that's physical.
All right. Hey, Art, anybody else have anything? If not, we can move on from this one. And maybe, Art, you can show us your map, your
Well,
adornment strategy if you're free.
yeah, just as a comment
No
on
rush.
adornments, art was the impetus for a recent update to adornments, which is kind of cool, which is uh, grids for ovals and circles.
Yeah, I was hoping he'd
And
show us that because I
I think
forgot
that
how to
was,
actually do it.
yeah, I think that was already there. But so well, there was an issue also there because when you actually put a grid into an adornment, if it has a shape, um, the adornments don't stay with their shape once you start populating them. So it was a bit of
mhm.
a concern. Well, I have something else I'll show you right now. So I was fooling around. One sec, share. Uh, yeah, you should be able to see. Um, can you see the window which has got, one second. Do you see anything?
Yes,
Okay. Is it a Tinderbox window or is it?
It's an Excel file.
Oh, okay, so then that's the wrong window. Sorry, one second. I did select that. Okay. Now it should work. Is it working now?
yes,
Now it's a larger monitor. Yeah,
Okay,
Tinderbox file.
with the sun shining on the top. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
yes.
So I just done a little bit of a cooking show. So basically I set up like, okay, I want to break up my tasks and my things that I do into four different groups. One is the creative, the second is like my work stuff, third is personal, and the fourth is India because I've been spending a lot of time working on that. And actually, I'd come up, this is sort of was the inspiration behind the request for what I'd actually wanted was adornments that you could actually, what's the word for it? Um, Sort of place within each other, but not intersect. So they would be concentric um, adornments because I wanted to create like a radar, a time radar, and go like this is my highest priority adornment. There's a lower priority one, or more distant in time. So we haven't yet got to that, but anyway, this is where I was, and I was like, how do I sort of figure out where I'm going? So I decided I'd make a note. Um, can you read that? Is it too small?
You
Pretty
are
small.
there,
Okay, so you are here, right? So I did a you are here, right?
here.
Yeah. And so now I wanted to be able to like sort of kind of move, here and figure out what my priorities were. So like this is what I ended up with, which is kind of it's funny. I enjoy doing it. So here's the thing, right? Which is more fleshed out as an idea. And I use the sticky feature of adornments so that I can now basically I can move who I am and where I am, but I'm always connected to these four priorities. All I did was make smaller links, me here now, and create, and then I drop them into the adornments. And so now everything is sort of like linked and connected in my visual sense. If I want, I can make this link thicker or give it a color just to prioritize in my head what I'm supposed to be doing. And again, this also shows like how clean my root level tends to be. Um, Pretty much every project that you open up on mine, you'll find the root level is very, very simple. And I can drill down into, so something like this, it gets really, really, really complex, as you can see. Um, but at the top level, it's easier for me to find. Now here, I can't go into too much detail because a lot of this is like super sensitive, but basically this was my way of tracking correspondences in and out. I just gave different colors for incoming and outgoing drafts and notices and letters in our mediation and arbitration. And I just give different visual. So none of this is programmatically linked, but it's a very good map layout for me to see basically, where I am. So this tells me like it's transcripts. This is mediation meetings, the various correspondences, and of course, if I click into these, I've got the detailed letter in here. So that's pretty much what I've been working on for the last 5 or 6 months.
And what's your output? I know you don't use templates necessarily in output. Like, what do you, is it talking? Is it a Word document? Is it a PowerPoint presentation? Like, what's the typical output of your work?
So again, this is at a point I had started flirting with the idea of doing outputs via Tinderbox, but in the long run, it just really doesn't work for me because so if I'm working with my lawyer, I'm typically in Word because that's the lingua franca of the legal world. It's Word documents and tracking changes. If I'm working on a brief or something that I'm presenting, then it would be something like Publisher. If I'm doing a lot of numbers work, then obviously it would be in Numbers or in Excel, depending on where the document came from and it's where it's heading. So I don't really have an output format per se. And Tinderbox really remains my storehouse for my knowledge, my thoughts, my process. Um, even big chunks of text. I don't feel very comfortable in that in the paradigm of having um, nested notes and then looking at preview. Switching back from preview back and forth to me is very distracting to my head. I like to stay within one side of my brain. So if I'm either going to be in the right side, I'll stay there, or on the left side, I'll stay there. Which is why when I said I did that 200 odd page presentation, I stayed in Publisher for the drafting of it. But the conceptual part, I was able to freely move around in Tinderbox and then even completely reorganize it a couple of times without one weighing down the other. So I don't really, Michael, have an output format. And the times I've worked on my creative projects, it's almost entirely been in something like Publisher. Because
Yeah.
for me, the visual presentation is super, super important. I may have a certain typeface, I may have an image, I may have a QR code, a link on one page. I may want it to look completely different from the next page. And sort of the visual presentation, especially if it's poetry or something like that, is supremely important. Even even the kerning and the presentation of the letters, the font I use is very, very, and it has to stay there. Once it's done, it's going to stay there. Whereas if I'm in Tinderbox, it tends to be a lot more floaty. Just one button press, one wrong thing could go and affect the rendering and the layout of multiple pages, which I can't afford.
Nice. All right. Who else has any other comments, thoughts, ideas? All right. Well, we can always end early too. We got about 19 minutes left. When you just came off video, you got something you want to chime in on?
No, I was done with lunch.
Got it. Hopefully it was good.
It was good. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
It's the
So
timing of things
actually,
here on
if
the
you
East
don't
Coast.
mind, with you guys here, as I said in the preamble to today's call, I'd I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on the nature of open source. What does that really mean in today's context? You know, h- the whole idea of what is networking today, given, local environments versus cloud environments, and how do we secure them?
Oh
Do you have thoughts
God.
on that, Win or Chuck?
Although it seemed like two
High level thought
different
is,
discussions.
They
yeah,
do.
very different
They may be.
discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah, but welcome to
And
my ADHD brain. I'm trying to wrap my head
Yeah.
around both of them at the same time.
yeah, open source has become too popular and too extensive, and we've lost control of it, is sort of my high level observation on open source. Too many players, too many actors, too many repositories. It's all over the place, and there's no real tracking mechanism for determining where open source is adequately used. Most companies have no idea of how to build an inventory of the source they deliver based on the open source projects they incorporate into what they do. It's we've created a monster, and it's eating us alive. Would be one cynical view.
Okay. Win, contribution to that?
Well, Frederick set his hand up.
Oh, Frederick, go for it.
Oh, I was just going to comment that, there's this concept of bill of materials, which used to refer to hardware. And recently people are
Yeah.
making standards and doing work on having it include software. And I think that would apply to open source. And that goes towards your security concerns of at least knowing what is in what you've built. And it also relates to intellectual property. Whether it will have traction or not, I'm not sure, but I guess it will because the government, I think, is requiring it. Um, and to the Chuck's point about open source, I think there's different kinds. I mean, there's the kind where a company basically wants to drive something, calls it open source, but it's sort of run by the company and they put so much resource into it that it's sort of their thing, but they let others contribute, which I think is a little different than open source that's not driven that way. I don't really, I'm not an expert on this, but that's my sense from seeing what goes on. Sometimes a company will want to drive something of their own, seed it with their own stuff, and then, oh, we'll let other people make tweaks to it, but it's really the stuff we have, you know.
Michael,
I
my
don't know where you're
question,
coming.
uh, Michael, my question was, could you refine your question a bit? So we try to figure out the dimensions of your question or concerns about it.
So let's just look at what's happening to the world when it comes to over the last, say, 20 years or so. We used to create, and or even what we're doing at home. We'll create, everything's becoming a network. And we have our private networks at home, we have our private networks at work. Um, especially in companies, we used to like stand our own servers, and we own, and we were responsible for establishing, setting the perimeter, and we monitored and all of the traffic that was happening within our own networks. And then as we led to speeding towards efficiencies and effectiveness and moved to the pace of business, moved to the pace of the developer, we moved our work towards the cloud, and that has since recently been expanding to be hybrid clouds. So multiple cloud environments integrating with each other. That has then further to expand even further to not only hybrid clouds where my information is being stored and processed, but also then anchored in specific applications. So you're getting this even the exponentially growing multi-cloud environment as you're piping in specific applications into those workloads. And if we recall from a computing perspective, the cloud is nothing more than just somebody else's computer. And so therefore, how do you manage the identities, the endpoints, and the traffic that is now happening across all of those, the multiplicities of networks that we're inviting into our lives? And how do we truly know what's going on and where it's going and who's in there and how are they allowed to be, and are they in fact allowed to be doing what they're doing?
Okay, so there's a great set of questions there, to which the answer is it's a mess. And then, but that seems distinct or at best overlapping with the open source question. That's what I was just trying to disentangle.
Well, I mean, but again, the software is just one of the things that we use to manage our workloads and our processes. And I see a lot of the times, like within our cloud computing, within our cloud network environment, there is closed source software that I'll license and buy, but then there's also I don't want to pay for it, and I can't afford to pay for everything, and so then therefore there is command line software or open source software that I will access to be able to possibly get some of my workload environments done within this ever-growing network environment. And I'm struggling. Like, how do we manage that? How do we know what's going on? How do we secure it? How do we protect it? What's important? What are the first principles that we should be thinking about? And it can get very overwhelming very fast.
So that's so yes, it can certainly get overwhelming. Um, the To stay with the open source related questions for a minute, the almost everything you say applies equally well to whether you're using proprietary software or open source software
Okay.
for it, and uh, the because in some sense the question is who's responsible for it if you've got a problem with it, uh, and and what are you paying for it? And is there anybody you can get support for if you really care that there's someone you can call? Right? Open source does not have that, although historically, frankly, many open source projects, or at least the communities around them, are much more responsive than trying to get a corporate answer. In any case, um, uh, the uh, I think from a corporate management point of view, so, what Chuck was talking about is true in terms of companies being able to figure out what's going on with their software. Uh, Although I think that also has a big dimension of that in the proprietary space. It's just that because it's easier to grab and toss some free software on your own machine, people pay less attention to it, perhaps, than if they had to pay for it. The supply chain problems with software of all kinds are real. That's sort of another dimension of it. Um, uh, there's a dimension that, to some extent, the open source world has diluted things because it's easy to just toss up your own project on GitHub. I mean, I've done this, right? And sure, you're welcome to the source code, but I don't care about it. So don't use it for anything you're going to rely on for it, as opposed to projects that have at least some intent of caring about them for the longer term. And some of those are obviously very successful and very useful software um, uh, from those. But trying to figure out what is the set of software I depend on, and actually knowing like every piece of that, nobody knows that these days. You don't know it. You don't even really know it if you're buying all your stuff from Microsoft. Um, uh, uh, for it.
And again, how do you keep track of the data that's within these networks and within these workloads and within this software?
I
And
like plain text files on my own machine.
Yeah, I don't know what you're asking about keeping track of your data. I mean,
well, when I say
go
your, I
to
mean all like a corporation, like when the workloads and when companies that are working, and how do we secure these networks? Or even like
Nobody
how do you
knows.
make sure that
We
if you're
don't.
using some cloud software,
It's not
you
secure.
know, that you know, or even as an individual, if you're using various forms of cloud hosted software, how do you know it's secure? And
It's
what do
not
you do?
secure. It's not secure. I mean, you'd have to encrypt it, but then you'd have to manage the encryption. I mean, anybody can go and hack a server somewhere, and it's fairly easy. I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, I think everything of import has already been extracted to China, at least, if not other places on the the dark web and so on. I mean, everybody's got it already, and they don't have to hack the protocols. They don't have to hack the applications. They just go to the server somewhere and get it server side. And if it wasn't encrypted, well, they've got it. And you can do that in almost any time because usually the passwords are 123 or something. And you just get in or you do social engineering, which is the new way of doing it, right? You just social engineer your way in and take the data from the server and get a bulk download and you're done. And so worrying about all these mechanisms are kind of futile since you just get it from the repository itself. And of course, with quantum computing, all the encryption won't work either unless you've upgraded, which most people haven't, except for iMessage, I guess. So, you know, I don't know what your question is. I think a lot of the personal data anyway is out there already. The whole Office of Personnel Management, all that data was taken. All the healthcare companies have had their stuff taken. I'm pretty sure it's most of them, if not all of them. I mean, the
Mhm.
data has been extracted and is sitting somewhere. But
Hmm.
So,
what's the
so
point? What are you worried about? It's already loose.
what's the equivalent to Salt Typhoon in this country?
I'm sorry, say it
Doge.
again.
What's the equivalent to Salt Typhoon in this country?
Yeah.
Doge
Oh, you say Doge?
Well,
Yeah, I guess you're right.
or Doge,
Yeah. The
however you
new
want to pronounce it.
the new project to collect all the data and collate it, right?
Right. Which the Chinese did with Salt Typhoon and
Yeah,
their
yeah.
right.
takeover of our
It's
Well,
similar. You're
I
right.
just I
basically every
just heard I
network
just
in North
You're
America.
right. You're right.
not
You're right.
this is not a political statement, but I just heard, but it might be interpreted as one. I just heard yesterday that because of the new bill that was put in place, ICE has now access to for the next 2 months the Medicaid and Medicare records of 80 million US people down to the diagnosis level
Yep.
for the purposes for the purpose of being able to identify basically immigrants that should not be having access to healthcare.
So now imagine if somebody hacks Doge, and then all that has been already, or whoever has got this, then you got it that it's all been collected, and then you just distribute it even wider.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
your information is public, basically. It sounds like.
Well,
Yeah.
So,
there's
Michael,
another.
is
Go ahead.
go ahead, Jacques.
I was just going to say there's another interesting recent realization about open source projects, and that is in the AI realm, we've had a bunch of AI systems that have been on the fly saying, yes, here's the open source project, here's the library you want included in your software, and it doesn't exist. But they just invent it on the
Oh,
fly.
and
And
people
then
have
people discover, oh, I can sort of guess what AI is inventing on the fly. I'll go and create it and set it up and have it be a source of Trojanized malware.
Oh, that's so
And that's
awesome!
happened.
Isn't that
yes.
awesome? You can also
So,
see them.
Michael, is there something we can sort of dig into at a more detailed level that would help relieve some anxiety here?
I don't know. It's a great question. I don't know. I don't know. Still thinking it through.
How much information do you have that's really of value that would be worth someone's effort to use in a certain way? I mean, what is really of value, and can you narrow it down to what's of value?
Well, I think part of it is, also too, there was in the Terms and Conditions movie back in 2010, I think one thing we need to be really careful with all of this is this idea of retroactive retribution,
Mhm.
right? In that, and you know, some things should be allowed to be private. Like if I'm having a raging case of diarrhea, should I be embarrassed of that? Probably not. Do I want to necessarily have that be known right now? No, because it's private, right? So there's this distinction between privacy and private, and uh and what I want to be known and not be known, and those boundaries. And in today's social zeitgeist, what is socially, commercially, regulatorily, legally allowed? Fast forward 10 years, 5 years, that comes back and says, well, you were doing this or you had this back 10 years ago, and now we're going to cancel you. Right. And so there's part of that too. Like I have a friend of mine, even she made a public post 3, 4 years ago about her views of transgender people playing female sports. And she was a female swimming athlete. And she said, I don't agree because she believed that the male genetics led to that body type being stronger and therefore led to poor competition. Fast forward 5 years, just 3 months ago, she lost so far this year about $180,000 in contracts because the political zeitgeist of the group she's working in said, you said this 5 years ago. We don't agree with that. You're trying to cancel the transgender and therefore you're out.
Wow.
And it has materially affected her business this year.
Well, that's a part
Um,
of a much larger discussion, though, Michael, don't you think?
Yeah.
Because from the point of view of like A, who owns the information, B, who has the power, time, and resources to deploy them, and see what is their end goal motivation. Arguably, without at the risk of sounding polemic, I would say if you actually take a very, very distant view of data management in a so-called free country like the United States, and contrast it with data regulation and management in a country like that, a controlled economy and polity like China, what really is the difference? Let me put forward an argument. So we're talking about the raging diarrhea situation. If you're in your home alone and you're suffering from raging diarrhea and you don't want to mention it to anybody, you stand the risk of, by not revealing that information, and if you had revealed it, maybe they would find a cluster and that was related to drinking water supply in your neighborhood, and that could come in at a wider social level as at a economic and a community level, with cures and
right.
fixes.
So there's a community commons benefit to having that data shared.
Well, exactly. And so if you go back to the origins of data and you look at sort of the Western model, which is like, ownership and greed, and, arguably, like I could look at the entire open source movements as almost equally defined and driven by philanthropy or a sense of community sharing, but also as a hope for eventual profits. PDF came out as a free format once long, long, long ago. Look at it today. So what ultimately is the goal? Who's managing it? Who's profiting it from it? And who are you paying your money to? And in the West,
Mhm.
you have billionaires. In the East, it's going to this. Like I spend a fair amount of time working with people in China, and I've visited there, I think probably about 7 or 8 times in the last 3 or 4 years. I'm actually stunned by the level of organization and community facility that has come from this sharing of data. Yes, they know where you are at any given time, but also they're able to anticipate every traffic light and every moment of your journeys, so you can make better decisions about where you're going and what you want to get done there.
So there's also a downside to it, of course, which is that you can correlate information, and there's been studies done where they looked at, for example, who rented videos, certain videos, and they could determine your sexual orientation by collating, I think, only 2 or 3 small data sets. I mean, it didn't take a whole lot. And so, if you're worried about an authoritarian approach towards people that are not popular in an administration or something, then there's a risk that any data could be correlated with any other data to lead to outcomes you might not like. So I think this whole privacy thing is very tricky because, Art is right about the common good, and there's also the flip side, which is the risks depending on
Yeah.
who's using the data. So
Well, the other problem whenever we discuss privacy and the term private is we keep tripping over that there are two meanings of private. One is confidentiality, the other is exclusivity. So when we talk about private, are we talking about something like private property, um, you know, ownership?
Oh.
I can exclude other users from using something that I consider to be private. That's one meaning, and we use that all the time relative to data. Then there's the other issue of confidentiality, not disclosing information, not sharing information broadly, or sharing it only under very specific circumstances. Those are really radically different concepts, and they get mixed up all the time in policy discussions, planning, thought exercises that people go through on how to protect data. You know, when we talk about personal information, we then put that in databases where we consider ownership of the data, but yet hidden in there is data that is private to the individuals that are being represented in that data. And you just go through any of the security policies that have been written over the last 3 decades, and you just run into constant confusion about mixing up those issues and ultimately making bad policy decisions. The whole credit card information banking industry just thoroughly confuses personal information from the exclusivity factor of data owned by banks and institutions.
Not to mention, if a company goes bankrupt, then all the terms and conditions are void, and then the new buyer can do whatever they want. So that's an exciting twist.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We give up exclusivity in exchange for something, whether it's convenience or transferability. Like we change from Mac to PC, we need to depend on the gods outside of our computer. And all that work behind you, Chuck, that at some point you want to be able to pass on. Like now you want it in a translatable format. You want it in a non-destructive file format and in a medium that somebody else can actually receive well.
Awesome. Yep. All right, guys. Well, it's top of the hour with this conversation. We can continue forever, but thank you very much for today's session.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye all.
Bye.
All right.